Hello again, it's Friday. The week seemed to fly by. I'm Maurice and I've been thinking about weariness. Do you get weary? Well, I think we all get weary at times. You know, if you do the same thing year after year, you can become weary. Even if you've just lived for many years. In old age, you can become weary because life just repeats. Christmas, Easter, and it goes round and round, and you can become weary. What about if you've been praying for loved ones year after year after year? You can become weary and feel as though you're just repeating the same prayers and you've nothing new to say to God. The problem is, when you're weary, you become vulnerable. And you're open to mistakes and you're prone to make unwise decisions. And Satan attacks us when we're weary because we're off guard. Even when we're doing God's work, if you get weary. I know ministers who've had mental breakdowns because of the work for God. And God didn't protect them. They got weary and they didn't know what to do about it. Maybe they were working for the church or their ministry and not for God, I don't know. But the fact is that so many ministers have had mental breakdowns. You know, when Israel were weary, then their eternal enemy, Amalek, took advantage of them. Let me read it. Moses is repeating the history of the children of Israel in Deuteronomy. This is chapter 25, verse 18. How Amalek met you by the way and smote the hindermost part of thee, even all that were feeble behind you, when you were faint and weary, and he feared not God. Satan doesn't fear God. When you're weary, he doesn't feel sorry for you. That's the time he attacks. You know, David, whose own son Absalom usurped the throne and became his enemy, he was advised to attack David when he was weary and vulnerable. 2 Samuel 17:2. This is what they said to Absalom. We will come upon him while he is weary and weak-handed, and will make him afraid, and all the people that are with him shall flee, and I will smite the king only. Terrible how people take advantage of weariness. There's another incident in the time of the Judges when a weary man was taken advantage of and killed. This is Judges 4:21. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent and took a hammer in her hand and went out softly to him and smote the nail into his temples and fastened it into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. So, how do we combat this? Well, the amazing fact is that God never gets weary. Isaiah 40:28. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, he faints not, neither is weary. There's no searching of his understanding. So God never faints or gets weary. But we're not God. Even Jesus got weary. Let me read you scripture, Mark 6:31. And Jesus said unto them, Come yourselves apart unto a desert place, and rest a while. For there were many comings and goings, and they had no leisure so much as to eat. Jesus was so busy in the ministry, he didn't even have time to eat, and he was weary. He said, let's go into a desert place and rest. So, rest is the answer to weariness. You know, you can go into your reserves, and that's all right. If you rest, you come out of your reserves. But when you don't rest and you're in your reserves and you carry on doing what you've always done, then you go past your reserves and there's no return from that. You have a breakdown. Your brain shuts down and says, I can't take any more. And then you do have to rest. My dad had a breakdown like that, and I said, Dad, you need to take 6 months off. And he suddenly realised, and he said, yes, son, but it was too late. It took 2 years before he recovered. He couldn't make simple decisions. Do you want a sugar in your tea? Hold on, son, let me think. And he had to try and force to remember whether he wanted sugar in his tea. I saw it firsthand, and I don't want to go that way, but I'm my Father's son, so I'm likely to go the same way. I'm preaching to myself. Rest is so important. You know, Jesus said his yoke was easy and his burden was light. And as well as rest, our attitude can play a big part in weariness or not being weary. Matthew 11:28-30. Come unto me, Jesus said, all you that labour and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart. You shall find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus overcome weariness often because when the pressure came, he didn't resist. That's meekness, not taking the pressure. He knew God was in charge, and he said, my yoke's easy because I don't take the pressure. You know, the pressure is proportional to the resistance you put up against it. So when you feel the pressure, your resistance is what makes you feel the pressure. If you don't resist, then when the pressure comes, there's no pressure. Pressure, we only feel it because resist. When I lift some heavy weights, I'm resisting the pressure of the weights. I'm fighting against the weight. So therefore, the pressure I feel is because I'm resisting the weights. Of course, if you're weightlifter, you don't resist the weights, so you'll drop them. But I'm talking about mental pressure. Well, if we don't find the circumstances that come upon us and acknowledge that God is in charge of everything and nothing can happen to me unless God allows, it should lead to a stress-free life that counteracts weariness of the mind. I'll carry on reading from Isaiah, where it said God doesn't get weary or rest, but he says that men do. Even the youth shall faint and be weary. This is verse 30 now. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fail. But they that wait upon the Lord, that's not resting, that's being attentive, that waiting on God. What's the next move, God? Not fighting your own battles, just following the cloud. They shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They'll walk and not faint. So there's answers in the Bible to weariness. You know, we're encouraged in the epistles to the churches to not get weary. Let me read from Galatians 6:9. Paul says, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. Sometimes you've got to press through. Jesus did, but we've got to balance it. 2 Thessalonians 3:13. But you, brethren, be not weary in well-doing. So there's some exhortations. Well, it's easier said than done, but how do we not be weary in well-doing? Well, I believe we've got to pace ourselves. You can't go 100 miles an hour, you'll just burn out. So we have to pace ourselves. You know, even God rested, not because he needed to, but he worked 6 days and rested from all his labours. Rest's so important, and God instituted that at creation. It's God's Sabbath, 1 in 7. So a man of God should rest 1 in 7, and so should everyone else. If you don't get a complete rest from your labours, it's not a religious day, it's not a day to go to church. Israel weren't told to worship God on the Sabbath, or read the law, or go to the temple. It was a rest from your labours. It's a mental rest. So you're resting from your labours physically and mentally. So we have to deal with stress and pressure, and not let it become a burden to us or becoming weary. So I hope I've helped you with that. I want to have a stress-free life. I don't want to take the pressure, but I need to be meek like Jesus. So the time's gone. Have a great weary-free week. Don't burn out, but go out burning. And keep thinking.